All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is Creating Debug Tools with SlateIM, and I'm Cody Albert. We will kick things off by going through the agenda here real quick for today. I'll start by introducing SlateIM. What is it? How is it different than typical Slate? We'll go through how to get started so that you can get up and running and creating your own debug tools, hopefully. I'll go through some examples that you can use as inspiration. Share some caveats, some limitations in the system as it exists today, and we'll talk a little bit about the future, what is up and coming. But before we do all of that, if you will indulge me, let's talk about me. So my name is Cody Albert. I am on the Technical Developer Relations team, TDR for short, and I've been doing that for 9.5 years. So really excited to hit those double digits next presentation, I hope. In that time, I have been supporting a number of teams, especially like the UI and editor teams. And as a result of that, debugging is kind of a huge part of what I do. Like if I had to summarize my entire job in 3 words, I'd say I fix code. Sometimes it's my code. Sometimes it's engine code. Sometimes it's your code. Sometimes we don't know whose code it is yet. So if you will let me get a little philosophical, I'm going to open things up with a quote. And this is from Brian Kernighan in The Elements of Programming Style, legendary computer scientist, inventor of the Hello World program. And Brian says, everyone knows that debugging is twice as hard as writing a program in the first place. So if you're as clever as you can be when you write it, how will you ever debug it? A similar sentiment was shared in 2013 on Twitter by Felipe Fortes. Debugging is like being the detective in a crime movie where you are also the murderer. So I think it's clear that we need good debug tools. Like there's really nothing better. And so I made a nice little chart here on the types of debug tools that are available to us. And in the bottom left here in the corner of shame, so not super useful and super slow to use, we have the guess and check method. This is when you just take a look at the code, you think you see the issue, so you make a change, you hit compile, go get a cup of coffee, come back and that didn't work, but this time for sure you see it, so you make another change, hit compile, go get another cup of coffee, and next thing you know, it's like 9 p.m., you've had 47 cups of coffee, you're frantically Googling sunk cost fallacy, trying to figure out where it all went wrong, and I'm definitely not speaking from experience on that. So next to that, over here, not super useful, but super fast. This is print string debugging, and don't let anybody shame you for doing this. We've all done it. You just pepper a bunch of print strings in there that say, made it here, made it over here, made it here. You've got one that says like WTF on a code path you never thought you'd see, and that's the one that pops up, of course. Super fast. So then up at the top for the more useful options, we've got comprehensive debug tooling. This is like building a debugger, things like the rewind debugger, the view model debugger, the things that we try to ship with the engine, because if we make it, then everybody can use it, but maybe it's hard to justify, spending 6 months on a tool when your game ships in 8 months. So hopefully we can do it, but we understand why it might be pretty imposing for some people. But we've got one more thing here, something that would be very fast and also very useful. So what could go there? Hopefully, my hope is it could be SlateIM. So with that little bit of intro pizzazz, let's get into it. What is SlateIM? SlateIM is an immediate mode wrapper for Slate. What is immediate mode, you might be asking? We're going to do a quick primer. So this doesn't really have anything to do with Slate. This is very generic, cool information, but most rendering APIs operate in one of 2 modes, either retained mode or immediate mode. And they both have their pros and cons. Retained mode is where we sort of store a state, a scene, something in between frames. We will update that scene as things change, and then when it's time to draw, we will draw that state. So this is how like all modern 3D renders tend to work, like the forward and deferred render all do this. We care about performance. The downside is that wherever there is state, there can be a bad state, and then you have to sort of debug that, is like what went wrong, what happened before. We can't just address each frame as it comes. On the other hand, you have immediate mode APIs. This is where we just redraw everything every frame. We have some sort of a loop. We say, what do we need to draw this frame? We put it all on screen. It's super flexible. It's data-driven. If we don't want to draw anything anymore, we just stop and it goes away. But it's not super efficient. We're doing a lot of work we probably don't need to. So quick pop quiz, rhetorical question, I guess. What is Slate? The answer is kind of both. It is technically an immediate mode API out of the box, and that's because it's used to build the editor, and the editor is a really complex tool. We don't need to run the editor at 60 frames per second on a potato. That's fine. But Slate is also the backbone of UMG. It's used in game UI all the time, and then we do care about performance. So we have things like retainer panels and validation panels, or just global invalidation mode, which kicks the entire thing over to being a retain mode API. So a little bit of both. But this is SlateIM. So this is an immediate mode only version of Slate, hopefully a little bit easier to write. And so we'll get into what exactly am I talking about here? What is SlateIM? This is a new plugin, experimental, introduced in 5.6. So it's pretty new. Haven't talked about it a whole lot yet. It's in the engine today, though, and the 5.7 preview has it as well. It is a new way of authoring Slate widgets, and I kind of want to focus on that. Like, it's a new way of writing code, because people hear Slate, they get afraid. You've seen Slate code, maybe you don't want to dig into learning all that. Totally new way of writing them. And it is a quick way to create debug interfaces and tools. Technically, it can be used to create any sort of interfaces or tools, but I'll talk a bit about why that's important a bit later. So, what isn't SlateIM? It is not a new UI system. I really want to emphasize all of the widgets that you see, all the bones of the system are Slate, like the old Slate that you know and love. It is not performance-oriented. This is why you could use it to create your game UI if you wanted. There's nothing explicitly stopping you. You probably won't be super happy with the performance results, though. And it is not fully featured. We only wrap certain Slate widgets, not all of the ones that exist, because we want you to be able to create things quickly. So if you had 100 widgets to pick from, you'd probably get decision paralysis. It'd take a while to figure out the best way to build it. We're going to give you the basic building blocks. You're going to be able to make something that is good enough. That's the idea. So it's like DRIM GUI. Quick show of hands, how many of you here have used DRIM GUI before? That is most of the room, as predicted. And how many have used it with Unreal Engine before? Slightly less, but still a lot. Great. So you're in the right place. In case you aren't one of the people who is familiar with DRM GUI, it is a dearly beloved UI system, platform agnostic, free. You can integrate it in basically anything. You can create widgets really quickly, draw stuff on the screen. People love it. If you don't believe me, ask half the room. So after hearing all that, you might say, hey, so this is like a DRM GUI? Yes, that's the idea. So we want something native. We want something that's similar. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we also kind of are by creating it in the Unreal way. And just to illustrate this point, sorry, first code jump scare of the presentation. There will be another later. Here is the Hello World widget that DRM GUI has on their GitHub page. There's the code. There's what it generates. Next to that, I have created the same thing in SlateIM. And you'll see it's not quite identical, but it looks pretty similar. It's got that Slate editor style going on. And the code looks mostly the same, except it's a little bit longer. And there's sort of two reasons for this. One is that DRM GUI automatically adds labels to every widget you create. You can put a label in there. I had to create these horizontal stacks and put the label in manually. The other reason is that we don't really assume that you want to stack things vertically. We kind of go with the more Slate style, create containers for every widget. So if you didn't care about these labels and you just wanted to get something pretty close, pretty quick, you get something more like this, which starts to look a lot more similar. So you notice the style of coding is the same, the speed is the same, and the results are pretty close. And that's what we're going for. So meanwhile, in Slate, I created this guy. It's a little bit uglier. And I used the plugin template that creates a standalone editor window. I shoved some things in. I didn't worry too much about the padding because the code was already this long. So this is how it looks in Slate. Now, I love this stuff. I think Slate's cool. I can like see the indentation and sort of visualize the hierarchy. I appreciate that. I also understand if you're not a UI programmer and you don't want to like deal with all this, that makes sense. You just want to create something quickly. This is a bit intimidating. So the next question that a lot of people ask, well, the first thing that I probably hear the most is why, like, you guys know that everybody uses IM GUI, right? And yeah, I mean, you guys saw the hands. The second thing everybody asks is, why won't you just ship IM GUI with the engine? Why don't you just give it to everybody? And there's kind of 3 reasons for this. The first reason is, I would say the most important, is maintenance. UI programmers are special and great, and I love them all, and there's not that many of them. It is not a thing a ton of people love to do, and we only have so many at Epic. So that team has to maintain, let's see, Slate, UMG, Common UI, view models, a lot of stuff. And they're also getting pulled to help with, editor, writing, various things. So one UI system to rule them all means that by creating it based on Slate, changes to Slate benefit from this. We're not splitting up the team to work on different things. We don't have to push new features into DRIM GUI while also trying to maintain Slate. It all improves the same tool at the end. Second thing is consistency. So Unreal Editor has a pretty unique style that does not match the style of other UI libraries like DRIM GUI. And it's nice to get the same styling. We could always customize this, but it's cool to just out of the box have things look the way that you're used to looking, have them blend nicely in with other tools that exist in the editor. And the third thing is integration. Slate already has a windowing system. It already has a tab manager with tab wells. It has all these things. We can integrate into those things nicely and get a few cool benefits, like, hey, we can make SlateIM widgets that are inside of a standalone window very easily. We don't have to do any custom windowing work for that. Cool. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water, because that was a lot of words, and then we will get into how to get started. The thing about Unreal Engine, and the thing I think I like the most, is that we have a way of tricking everybody into becoming an engineer and sort of taking power away from engineers. So with Blueprint, we are like, hey, designers, you can write code, go ahead. And then with materials, we're like, hey, artists, you can write shaders, go ahead. And this is sort of in that same philosophy. I want everybody to sort of have a chance at making tools, even if you don't think of yourself as a tools programmer. So I'm going to walk through just the basics of getting up and running to start making SlateIM widgets. If you're like a seasoned tools programmer, feel free to play games on your phone. I won't be offended. But otherwise, we're gonna go through this in a lot of detail. And first off, there's easy mode. So the secret sauce of SlateIM is that anywhere you have a tick, you can create widgets, and they will appear as long as you're ticking. So here's just a very simple actor class. I just made a little debug actor. I wrapped my logic in this macro to make sure it gets filtered out in a shipping build, just because it's debug code. We don't really want it there. Then you'll see I'm doing a couple things. I'm getting the player controller. I'm using that to create a root for my widget, which gives us easy access to the viewport. And then I'm making some text. Hello world, made it purple, pink, magenta, whatever. And grabbed a style from the credits of the engine because it's big, and big is cool. And that's all you gotta do. You can do this anywhere there's a tick. You can create stuff. But if you're trying to create a standalone tool, you want things to be a little nicer. You're not gonna throw an actor in the world to tick for you. And so here's the steps. Step 1, you will create a new plugin. You don't need to, but it's a good idea, because if you have your debug stuff in a plugin, it's very easy to turn it off. So I created a plugin called My Debug Tools. I used the blank template because I don't want any of the stuff there. Step 2, I linked it to my project, which I used the FPS project template here, and I linked it to the SlateIM plugin. So this makes it sort of a bridge. If my debug tools are on, it's going to pull in the SlateIM plugin automatically. I haven't explicitly enabled that, so if I turn off my debug tools later, that'll go away too. Perfect. I also kind of recommend adding this enabled by default line potentially. Whenever you create project level plugins, the default behavior is that everybody gets them. They're just on. If you add this, it means that other developers working on the project will have to explicitly enable it. So if you want to keep it, to yourself, that's an option. And then they can always enable it if they want it. Step 3, we are going to modify our uproject file for our project, and we are going to enable the plugin. So you could go into the plugin browser, you could check the box, you could enable it that way. I recommend doing this because you can provide this target configuration deny list that lets you basically filter it out from shipping builds automatically. So you can just be absolutely sure my debug code is not going to end up in a shipping build. I'm not going to accidentally give the players my menu that makes you Superman. It's fine. Step 4, we are going to register a widget, which we'll create later. So I went into my plugins module file. I added a pointer to my widget. I'm going to create it when I start up the module. I'm going to clean it up when I destroy the module. And I'm going to provide it with a console command to summon my thing. and a bit of text to describe that console command. Then step 5, we're going to actually make the widget. So here I've got a new class, my debug window. I'm extending SlateIM window base, which I will talk about later. I'm providing a window title and an initial size. And then I have a draw window function I can override. And now I just put all of my SlateIM code in there. It'll get drawn into my window. I have the beginnings of a tool. In this case, it's just a pop-up that I can click close and it goes away. But now I can start playing around, adding new things, and developing a tool. Easy as that. Great. So let's get into what is in SlateIM, like what comes out of the box. And at the root of it all, we've got widget roots. So there are 3 types of roots. Every widget you create in SlateIM needs to have a root. This is the basis of creating all your other things. The first type is the window root. So this is going to create a standalone window. This is great if you want to like move your tool to another monitor, maybe display some debug information. And that will give you, you'll give it a titles, or a window title and an initial size, as we saw before. The second type is a viewport root. So this is if you want the content in the viewport, which is more like how you usually see DRIM GUI used, embedded directly in there. This could be more useful if you want to be able to show some debug stuff on a device, like on a console, because you won't have windows, obviously. You're going to give it a viewport that you want to add it to, and there's some layout settings you can provide to decide where in the viewport it's going to appear. And third, we have exposed root. This is sort of the more advanced use case, but in exposed roots, we don't actually draw anything. We just give you an S widget that wraps the whole thing, and you can embed that however you want. So if you had an existing Slate tool that you've been working on, maybe you are a tools developer, but you kind of want to mock something up in SlateIM really quick, you could do this to get an S widget you could add to your hierarchy. It would like embed nicely in there. At the bottom, I've got the function signatures for these different types. You will notice that viewport root has 3 different ways of doing it. You can give it a viewport where you want to draw. You can give it a player, and we'll find the viewport for you, which is super convenient. Or you can give it an asset viewport, because you can totally embed things in, say, the blueprint editor. That would be fine. And at the bottom there, you'll notice there's just one end root call. That should be the last thing you call. It's always the same one. We don't care what kind of root. Just make sure you end it. All right, from there, we have some base classes, and these are optional. You do not need to use any of these. You can always just add stuff into a tick function, but we know that if you're making tools, you probably need some certain things. So we're just going to give you those things out of the box. And at the top, we have SlateIM widget base. All this does is basically register with the post Slate tick callback and give you your own tick function to write stuff. So you're going to have a draw widget function you override. We're going to tick it for you. Now you don't need to worry about figuring out where to tick your UI. Under that, on the left, we've got SlateIM widget with command base, which is a mouthful. That is all the stuff as before, except it also will register a console command for you. So if you just need some way to summon the widget, you don't want to like figure out where to add a button, this lets you create a new console command, type it in the console to create your widget. And in this case, you're also going to override draw widget. Next to that, we have an exposed widget version. So, you know, again, if you're embedding in some existing tool, you're going to override draw content instead of draw widget. And we have a delegate you can hook up there to find out when your widget changes. So if your tool needs to adjust, you know, maybe resize based on the content being drawn, it can hook up to that callback. And at the bottom, we have SlateIM window base. So all the stuff from before, except we're going to give you a window. And now you're going to override draw window instead of overriding draw widget. Cool. So here is the, we'll say, menu of possible widgets that you have available. Just a quick look. I recommend if you are curious, you take a look at the header, slateim.h. It's actually laid out really nicely. It's super well commented. It's categorized. So even if you're not like a I like to read code type of person, you can just scroll through that and sort of see everything that's available to you. You can see the parameters it takes. It's good API documentation. But I gave you a quick overview of what we have. I kind of categorized it into 4 boxes, literally, I guess. The first one, containers. These are things that contain other widgets. So stuff like your borders, your stack boxes, wrap boxes, scroll boxes. And we've got like a pretty basic table set up to quickly create tables of data, which is like the main thing people probably want to do. We've got some content widgets, like obviously text and images, progress bars. We've also got this pretty cool graphing library, so you can quickly draw a graph if you need to. We've got some controls, things like buttons. Editable text is like your text field. Check boxes, spin boxes for changing integers or floats like we do in the editor. Sliders, combo box if you need to drop down. Selection list is like a sort of multi-select widget. And then we've got some utility things that are available. So menus, if you want to create submenus within your widget, you can put tooltips on any of this stuff, pop-ups if you need like a confirmation dialog, and like a pretty basic, easy to use input polling library. So you can find out what keys are being pressed while your widget is focused. All right, so if you're familiar with Slate, you might be aware that widgets contain slots, slots contain other widgets. Any widget could have 0 slots, like text. No widgets can go inside of that. Could have 1 slot like a button or a border, or it could have many slots like a vertical box. We have similar things here. The syntax is pretty different though. So in SlateIM, in order to change slot settings, before you create a widget, you just set the settings. After the widget's created, they're all going to fall back to the defaults. These defaults are listed in the code. I pasted them there for you. Good reference, but basically anytime you want to make a widget, if you want anything different than these defaults, you just set it right before you make that widget. And this lets you do things like decide how much space something should take up within a slot, how it should be aligned in that slot, padding, so on. And my favorite part of all this, widget styling. So Unreal Engine already has a lot of styles in it. They exist, and you can sort of kit bash styles together to make your widget look better. Now, people are often like, it's a debug widget. It's supposed to be ugly, but it doesn't have to be. I think you deserve better. So you can quickly look through what styles are available. You can take things out of the editor. You can make your thing look a little bit nicer. The cool thing about this is we added this Slate style browser here. This basically just displays all of the styles already registered right now in the editor. Has a copy button that you can quickly grab the reference. So rather than dig through a bunch of style classes, you can just look through this list, be like, I want a red button, copy, drop it in your button, done. Easy. One little word of warning on this. If you summon this in the editor, you will get all of the styles that are available at runtime and all the styles that aren't. You'll get anything that is currently registered. So if your widget's going to appear, say, in a packaged build that you're going to put on a device to test, you might want to make sure the styles will actually be there. The best recommendation for that would probably be to create that build and open the style browser there, and you'll see exactly what's available. So you'll get an actually usable list. Worst case, your style disappears. You go back to your ugly debug widget. That's fine. So now I'm going to get into some examples, some things that are in SlateIM now that you can take a look at to get some inspiration, as well as an example of an internal use case that we have that might be kind of interesting to you. So if you are just curious of kind of what this all looks like, in SlateIM examples.cpp, we have the SlateIM test suite window. You can summon this with a console command as soon as SlateIM is enabled, toggle test suite window. And we've got pretty much one of everything at least in here, so you can just see what widgets are available, you can test them out, and then you can look at the code to get an idea of how they were created, how we like to build things. You'll see that when we create it, we are using the SlateIM window base class as before, so we get a free window with a tick function. We're giving it a title and a location, and there it is, including that cool graph library. So a couple things I want to call out on this one. We have a button in the corner of it to open that style browser you saw before, so that's pretty useful, as well as a little performance counter in the top right corner. So I talked before, this isn't really about performance. This test suite is taking 0.35 milliseconds here on my dev machine. That's nothing for in the editor, it's totally fine, but if you're trying to do a 60 FPS AAA game, that's kind of unacceptable for one UI window. So again, better for debug tools. But you might be like, I want to see what it looks like in the viewport. So let me introduce you to the SlateIM test suite viewport. Same exact thing, different console command. It's now embedded in the viewport. And when we look at the code for how this is created, you can see that we have this layout object that we create. We give it anchors, alignment, size. That determines where in the viewport we draw it. It's sort of centered in the top here. And you can use that to make sure that different actors are drawing things to different parts of the viewport, or different tools are appearing in the place that you want them. And finally, a little peek behind the curtain, an internal tool. If you are aware of what's happening kind of in the UEFN world, you might have heard of SceneGraph. The team that's building that created a debugger that was really important for them to sort of work out some issues with it. And that was initially created in DRIM GUI, because like many of you, we use it too sometimes. When we created this tool, it looked like this. And the person who made it said, this SlateIM stuff looks really cool. I want to try converting it, see how it looks, see how long it takes. It took him about a week to do it, but a few features were added in the meantime. The networking model changed a little bit, so that's maybe an overestimate. He said probably it would take a day or two just to convert it if you weren't changing anything about it. And here's the result. So pretty similar, but now it looks like it matches in the editor. It's very nice. A couple days of work to translate. And he said it was pretty simple. It was pretty obvious kind of what to use in place of all the DRIM GUI calls. So I'd recommend if anybody has especially simple tools in DRIM GUI and wants to give it a try, that could be a good first test, is like just see if it converts nicely. See if you're missing anything. See if you're able to make your widget again. Cool. So now for the sad part of the presentation, perhaps a few caveats, some limitations in the system as it exists today, because I want to be honest with you all. One big one, and the first talk I did at Unreal Fest was a big breakdown of like the Unreal Engine input hierarchy, because it's pretty hard to wrap your head around unless you see some diagrams. And once again, if you've seen that talk or you've dug into that system, you may understand why it's sort of hard to deal with input if the window doesn't have focus, especially if it's like a separate window on another monitor. You're playing game in Pi, you want to like visualize some data about the inputs it's getting. It's going to be kind of hard to do that out of the box. But I have a workaround for you, and that's input preprocessors. So Slate has a feature called input preprocessors. They're super cool. They let you register a class that just gets all input before anything else. It can decide whether it wants to terminate that input or if it wants to propagate it onward after perhaps reacting to it. And here I did a quick test. It's not there now, but very soon I promise I'm going to post this to the dev community. And this is a SlateIM widget that registers its own preprocessor, and that ensures it can get all input no matter what before anybody else. So in this example here, I basically just created an input processor, used that interface. I made a handle down key event, so that's the function that's going to get all my key downs. And I just grabbed whatever the key was, but returned false so that the event would continue onward. And I was able to sort of print out the result of that key. So this is how you could really easily create, like an input debugging thing without like having fear that you're going to mess with input. And finally, if you are familiar with DRIM GUI, you may be familiar with the remote viewer plugin. I think there's actually a couple out there. Basically, it lets you create some IM GUI stuff on a server and draw the resulting widget on a client so that you can help debug remote targets, maybe like something on Raspberry Pi that doesn't have a screen. We don't have anything like that right now. It is on the roadmap. Can't tell you when. It's a pretty big lift, but if that's something you really rely on today, then DRIM GUI might still be your ticket until then. Cool. So what's in the future? What is coming next? So a little peek behind the curtain into our plans for SlateIM. And to start things off, what came yesterday, because the 5.7 preview just dropped, and it came with a few cool things. The biggest one is tabs. So you can now create tabs within your widgets. We have a new example in that example widget I mentioned before with just a ton of tabs. Also, we converted that widget and put all of its content into tabs as well. So it both uses tabs and displays tabs. It's kind of funny. We also added some server client debugging stuff. So there's a SlateIM actor class now that can be used to help get debugging information off of a server, and a number of bug fixes. And this is still experimental. You may still run into other bugs. Definitely let us know if you do. Things may get weird if you don't start and end your roots correctly. If things don't match up, it can break things, but we're working on all these things. And I can't promise any dates, but I will give you the wish list. So this is kind of everything that we know the system would benefit from. We can't tell you when, but we would like to add it. The left side is sort of the big ticket items. So we've got Nomad tabs and shared tab groups. So it'd be nice to be able to create a SlateIM widget and dock it in existing editor widgets and existing tab wells, or like a shared tab group, which would be something like, I want one window that has my 5 SlateIM widgets in it. You could do that by creating them as roots and putting them in something else, but it'd be nice to just be able to connect them all together very easily. We want to support menu bars. So this would be like a top menu bar, like a file menu. We want to have some canvas drawing functionality if you just want to draw some basic shapes. We've got the graphing library, but we could go a little further with that. And documentation would be nice. There isn't any, so this talk might be it for some period of time, but we'd like to properly document it. And as I said, the SlateIM header really is good about showing what the widgets do, so don't be afraid of looking at that, but we'll get this all onto the dev community in time. On the right, I just have sort of a host of things that we also want to do. We've kind of heard these requested. Things like gamepad support, blueprint support. It'd be cool to create widgets with blueprints. A details view widget. If you make editor utility widgets a lot, you might know how powerful this is to be able to like expose and modify the details view of any object. So that's something we'd like to get in there. Image buttons, a few other things here. But if you don't want to wait, I would like to invite you to join us on GitHub, because we allow anybody at all to submit GitHub pull requests, and we will evaluate them. And if they're useful, and they're kind of, especially if they're things that we already wanted to do, we'd love to integrate those. So I've got a QR code here. It'll be at the end as well. If you see features here that you were like, if only I had that, I could use SlateIM. I might build it myself. You could always put in a pull request on GitHub. If we integrate it, then you no longer need to maintain it. You can get back in line with source. It's kind of a win-win if you ask me. And that is it for me. So thank you so much.